Hey everybody, this is Mike Nelson of the Mike Nelson Show. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed already. We have over 600 subscribers around the world. I want to thank everybody for their support. Today I got a very cool guest. I got Mark Sutcliffe of the band Trespass. How you doing today, Mark?
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing good. All right, so where does your musical journey begin, Mark? When did it all kick off for you?
Uh, well, I left school in England. We leave school at 16, or we used to. People seem to stay at school forever now, but I left at 16, and I went to work in a lab actually. It was a cool backpack factory, and I got friendly with some of the guys who worked on the shop floor, who were a little older than me, and I'd always wanted a guitar. And my father made me a guitar when I was a kid, a triangular guitar actually, which I've never forgotten. But I couldn't really, it wasn't really possible to play it, but I liked it still. But anyway, when I bought a guitar, I think the second week that I was at work, and then I met these guys, and they said, what sort of music do you like? And quite honestly, at that stage, although we listened to the radio in our house, we didn't actually have a record player. And these guys, we sort of got one around that time. So all through my childhood, we didn't really have a record player, but we got this record player. My parents did, and the guys lent me. I remember I borrowed three albums: Led Zeppelin one, Let There Be Rock by AC/DC, and On the Level by Status Quo. And I listened to this music, and I thought, oh my God, this is the music I've been waiting for all my life. There were some British bands who used to get in the charts who had a kind of more rocky sound, but this heavy rock thing just appealed to me. Because I had long hair then anyway, because it was the 70s. But I felt like I'd sort of found something I could really belong to, and it coincided me discovering this music with getting a guitar. So I just set out to learn this music. And
Why
that
did
was the
you pick
start.
a guitar and not like the bass or the drums? What do you think drove you toward the guitar?
I don't know. I always wanted a guitar. I don't know. I was fairly musical at school, but I wanted a guitar. And I guess I was naive. I didn't really know anything about them. So I went and bought a Spanish style acoustic. That's what I started playing on. And I realized I couldn't get the sounds that these guys on the records were getting. And but eventually I ended up with an electric guitar. But I started quite late. I mean, I was 16, which is because I teach guitar now, so a lot of my students are very young.
Yeah.
Some of them, my oldest one is 74, so
Wow.
he's he's a little older than me. But it's yeah, I really enjoy teaching. But I taught myself with all the bad habits that usually brings. But I don't know now. I just found something that I really wanted to do, and the guitar. I guess it's got so many styles. That's the thing. And so eventually I got an electric guitar, and as I started to get better, I used to visit the guitar shops like all the guys do and play something terrible. But it used to be Smoke on the Water in our day, but I guess it's Enter Sandman now.
Yeah, basically. So, growing up in England in the 70s, how do you think that shaped you as a musician?
There were some really great bands around then. Once they weren't like right at the forefront of the media. They weren't really. I mean, sort of Kerrang magazine came out, like in the middle in 79, 80, in the middle of the new wave of British heavy metal. Sounds was the more like a newspaper, a music newspaper, a bit like Melody Maker or New Musical Express. And I started to get Sounds, and that was like, the Bible then for us, because we kept us in touch with what was happening in London. But I think it was just the bands, the quality of the bands. And I think, and it's weird thinking back now. I mean, when I started to get quite good in sort of the late 70s, I look at bands like Deep Purple, and they seemed although they were fantastic, I love Purple, I always will, and I always have. They seemed a little bit like yesterday's news at that time, but
Yeah.
actually it was only a few years before that they'd made Machine Head, you know, so the band seemed to rise and fall quite quickly then. But when I see Roger Glover and Ian Pace up on stage now, I think, wow, I would never have believed they'd still be going now and doing so well. So, you know, the music then has lasted the test of time.
Now tell me the story of how Trespass formed.
Well, but what happened was I got this guitar, and I've got a younger brother, my brother Paul, and I just wanted to start the idea of actually forming a band or playing. So, but he started playing on old biscuit tins and stuff to start with, and then he you know, he obviously was enjoying it. So my father very generously got him a drum kit, and Paul was such a natural player. I mean, when we recorded One of These Days and those other songs in '79, Paul had only actually had a drum kit for 18 months.
Wow.
And when you listen to the quality of the playing on some of that early stuff, he just had a natural ability. And as my guitar playing improved and was a little, I started a little ahead of him, we suddenly had this unit of me and him playing very instinctively with each other, being brothers. And that was a very important part of Trespass. And then my cousin was briefly in the band on bass. So we're all called Sutcliffe. So we had the three Sutcliffes, you know. But as happens with a lot of kids at that sort of age, you often get faced with a choice of car or guitar. And he chose car.
Yep.
And and the two of us carried on with other members. And that then formed what was the sort of start of the idea of a band. I like the two guitar thing. I was a big fan of Wishbone Ash and Thin Lizzy, and I liked two guitars. I think possibly more so than keyboards, although I do like keyboards as well. So we did our first show. We weren't called Trespass then; we were called Track 4. We did our first show in November '79, and then later on, oh no, March '79. I apologise. And then later on that year, we recorded One of These Days. But something that I really believe in is every show I've tried to always include original material. The songwriting is very important to me, and so you know we tend to do our own material right from the start, alongside Sabbath, Lizzie, Purple, you know, and it
Yeah.
fitted in so well that people would come up and say, who was that song you did that you did? So, you know, so our songs were standing out amongst the covers. So, and that was good to hear.
Now, the new wave of British heavy metal was going on during that time. Were you into that movement, or what did you think of the other bands? Talk to me about that.
But because we were out in the countryside, you know, about 70 miles from London, not a long way from the centre of London, but in a part of England called East Anglia, which is, there are a lot of US air bases here still. There
Wow.
were a lot of bases here during the war. So we've got RAF Lakenheath and RAF Mildenhall that are completely full of Americans. So I have been onto the base lots of times, and it's great
Wow.
food.
Better food. Our food's better, huh?
The food is good, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so my second wife was American as well, so
Okay.
I got to understand the culture a little bit. And yeah, we had a great time. And but this part of the world is a bit out of the way, if you like. So we didn't have any direct competition with other bands in our area. And what kind of used to happen was, as Trespass started to, with One of These Days, started to get a bit of, you know, interest, we'd kind of appear in London, and all the London bands were saying, "Who are these guys coming here from the boonies?" And like, who are these guys? And we did get a bit of pushback from the London guys. The only band we actually sort of got to know a little bit was Def Leppard
Okay, yeah.
through a weird connection, because our rhythm guitarist worked in Sheffield in a music shop, and Def Leppard bought some equipment from there, and he got to know Rick Allen, the drummer, quite well. But then when he moved back down, we kind of lost touch with those guys. But we also we met Phil Collin a few times because we supported his band Girl when we first started to gig in London. So we knew the guys. You know, I guess most of the other guys were a little older than us. They were kind of ahead of us. We were behind the curve slightly. I don't think that really helped us actually, because we were so green, you know.
So Trespass recorded a few singles in the early, in the early 80s. Any thoughts on that? Thoughts on that period where you guys had a chance to record some music? Talk to me about that.
What happened was it was really the post-punk era, 78, 79. And a lot of independent labels had come up during the punk era. And I think people realized you don't have to go to send endless demos to big record companies. If you want to make a record, make your own record. And that was starting to happen. And I think we kind of got caught these days. And it started to get a lot of airplay, sort of rock discos and things like that. And it really started to take off. And the problem that we had is we were a bit of a cottage industry, and we just couldn't keep up with demand. You know, I think maybe if that single had been through a major label, more would have happened. But so it was a bit of a single mentality, I think, because of the whole punk thing. But I realise now, looking back, that we should have made an album in 1979, 80. I think we probably would have landed a major deal then, because I think what happened with a lot of bands is as soon as Maiden and Def Leppard and Saxon started to take off, as usual happens in the record industry, they started looking round for a similar band, but you had to already have the material. So we missed out there.
What do you think was the biggest show that Trespass did back in those days? Like opening up for a big name that maybe we don't know about?
Well, we did those. I mean, Girl weren't exactly a big name, but they had a lot of backing. And our first shows with them at the Marquee Club in Wardour Street in Soho in London were just, I remember it so well, because back then those little clubs were so small, about 400 or 500 people, but the lighting rigs were all full power Parkan old-fashioned lighting rigs, which were like about 40,000 watts. And I remember going out on stage at the Marquee and being hit by this incredible reaction, a massive cheer, like nothing I'd ever experienced before.
Wow.
Plus 40K of lights going on in my face.
Wow.
It was like suddenly, it was real. It's just amazing. Those first shows in London, they were good. But and we supported some other people and that since then. But yeah, it's I think Trespass even now would benefit from a UK tour with another band that rose in the new album. But getting shows these days is really hard.
Now, you mentioned in previous interviews that Trespass was close to getting a major deal. Can you elaborate on that? Was Trespass close to getting a major album deal in the early 80s?
Yes, I think we had some very strong interest from two labels, EMI, who of course already had Iron Maiden. And one of the reasons we thought that way was that Iron Maiden had 2 tracks on Metal for Mothers 1, and all the other bands had 1, and we got 2 tracks on Metal for Mothers 2. So obviously putting 2 and 2 together, we thought, wow, we're on our way here. This is going to be good. And also we signed to a very big booking agent who had Fleetwood Mac and Elton John, and
Wow.
they just got us a load of gigs just like that. And but we didn't have these sort of the infrastructure to be able to take advantage of these things. So again, it was not making an album, but we did a 5 or 6 track demo for EMI, and then I think basically they wanted to concentrate on Maiden. And if you wanted to be cynical, you could say that EMI hoovered a lot of other bands up and then kept them at bay to let Maiden through.
Yeah.
I'm not a cynic. Um, but yeah, and we did a Radio 1 session and things like that, and it was all moving really well. And then I don't think I've ever told anybody this before, but Michael Schenker's people approached Trespass
Wow.
with a view to him doing our song "Live It Up"
Really? Wow.
as a single.
Really?
Because I mean, obviously Michael Schenker, he's one of my favorite guitarists.
Yeah, for sure.
But whether or not he was able to write singles, catchy singles, and his management sort of kept saying, well, because we wanted to follow up one of these days really quickly, but they kept saying, no, Michael wants this song. Wait a bit, and they kept us waiting a long time. This was Chrysalis Records, which was Michael's label at the time. In the end, he just wouldn't do it. The record
Wow.
company wanted him to do it, but he wouldn't.
Really?
And so we sort of we lost out a bit there as well, because obviously if Michael had done Live It Up, certainly from a songwriting credit point of view, I'd have been away. But there you go, it didn't happen. And so yeah, it's just one of those things. We just missed out. But I think the main reason was that we should have released an album. We should have recorded and released an album. But in those days, it was quite an expensive thing to do. And I guess the guys that were looking after us wanted to wait for a major to foot the bill. And it just never happened.
So what happened to Trespass after this? After the period you guys played for a few years, what happened to the band after this?
Well, we went through. I mean, one of the things with me is that Trespass for me. I mean, it seems like a really bad thing to say, but is a very personal thing for me. So, although I know I'm not the greatest singer, I feel like I want to my character. I want to come across, because a lot of my music is about things that are really important to me, and I always felt blocked off somehow by having a vocalist. But the industry, especially coming back to us being so naive, they kept saying, "You've got to get a front man. You've got to get a front man," because I think they had a bit of a Deep Purple style, profile that they wanted to fill with Ronnie Dio or Ian Gillan up the front, and I never wanted that. I preferred bands like Thin Lizzy, where the bassist played and it was
Yeah.
sort of more part of the band.
And it's musical driven. Yeah.
And also, and the trouble is that I mean, who wouldn't want Ronnie Dio to sing their songs? But there is only one Ronnie Dio. And what I hear when I listen to a lot of bands now, even bands from our era, they seem to have got into this thing of, they've got this kind of singer who's very talented, but they all sound a little bit the same. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And so, I mean, for instance, I mean, no one could say that Ozzy Osbourne's got a great voice. But as soon as you hear Ozzy sing something, you know it's him.
Yep.
And of course, Dio sang in Sabbath and Gillan as well. But True Sabbath has got Ozzy's voice on it, hasn't it?
Yep, for sure.
And I guess I feel the same. So we messed about a lot with different lineups, basically. That was another reason why I think I would have rather stood or fallen on my own, what I believed in. So even now, where we're getting back into it again, I'm still singing, even though it's not my first instrument, as it were, but it's important to me for that character to come across. So basically, going back to your question, so basically we went through several different singers. We all got a bit disillusioned, but then in 1982, my father suddenly died. He had a cerebral hemorrhage and just died one Saturday night. And of course, we just couldn't carry on after that, because he'd been such a big part of it for me and my brother, and it just blew us all away, and we just decided to have a break, and then I didn't really start writing again until about 86.
Let's fast forward a little bit to like the late '80s. You had a band called Blue Blood. Of course, that was the other form of Trespass, right? You guys didn't use the Trespass name there in the late '80s.
That's right. We reformed Trespass at '86, and my daughter was born that year,
Hmm.
and I just wanted to carry on where we'd left off, you know. But I guess there was a feeling especially with my brother, that I don't know, if we should move on to something new, and I sort of regret it now, but I guess that there were a lot of pressures at the time, and I guess we went down a slightly more commercial route than we
Mhm.
probably would otherwise have done. And of course, then you had bands like Bon Jovi, and it was the era where Kiss took their makeup off,
Yeah.
and a lot of American bands playing that kind of good time rock. A band called Helix, I remember them as well. Came over and toured. I liked it. I liked them. I liked that kind of stuff. Cinderella,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I was very taken with that. And I guess we kind of slipped. And then we got, obviously, because the band started to get record company interest again. We were lucky in a way. I guess I'm proud that to form two completely separate bands and take them both to your national level is good. So I'm proud of the music, but I wasn't happy playing that kind of stuff really.
Now, in the early '90s, you recorded an album as Trespass again. Was that kind of difficult to play that kind of music in the early '90s? You know, with the whole grunge movement going on. What was that like? You know, being basically a band that was kind of not with what was going on around the world
Yeah,
in rock
yeah,
and roll.
it was really interesting because, as you probably know, the guys in Metallica were in the Trespass fan club.
Yeah.
Lars and James used to write to us, and of course I had no idea who they were at the time.
Wow.
But Lars especially
Yeah.
wrote to a lot of bands, and I think he was certainly inspired by the fact that bands in the UK just got their guitars and did it kind of thing. He liked that idea, um, and we've kept in touch with them subsequently, you know, and been to some really great shows. And the guys actually came out and played a few bars of one of these days at
Wow.
the start of their encore at the O2 in London.
Really? Wow.
And you can imagine that was had a big effect on me. And also, I've spoken to James, and he said, "Yeah, I mean, he did it as a little bit of a throwaway comment. He said, "Yeah, man," he said, "we jammed one of these days for Garage Inc. But in the end, it didn't make it." And I thought, "No, why are you telling me this?" You know.
Yeah.
But I think if they wanted a really big hit, they could still cover one of these days.
Yeah, they could. Yeah,
Yeah.
for
Come
sure.
on, James, are you listening?
Yeah, let's
I'm
make
sure
it happen. Yeah.
I guess they listen to your show, you know.
Yeah. Well, they tune into my show because I interviewed Castor Hetfield, his son. So they tune into the show. So
Fantastic. That's good to
yep.
know.
Yep.
I hope he heard me.
Yeah. All right. So in the last 8 years, Trespass has released, two full-length albums. You got a third one coming up very soon. How's it been playing in the 21st century? How's it been, reforming the band in the last few years? Tell me about, the experience of playing in the modern day,
Yeah.
Trespass.
Things have really moved on. I mean, look at what we're doing now.
Yeah.
I couldn't have dreamed of doing something like this in 1980. It's almost like everything was still valves, tubes, tube amps, and everything was like slow. But now it's like, you've got social media, you've got the whole. And I was going to say, just recapping slightly. So obviously Metallica started to have a bit of an influence on me, and also I really liked Alice in Chains,
Yeah.
that inspired me to get back into rock. But probably I reflected my newfound interest in that kind of music a bit on the Head album, a bit too much. It was a bit dark, but I guess coming out of the Blue Blood thing, I went a bit dark. I wanted to sort of say I'm back playing metal, playing rock, and it's reflected in that album. But then we did the covers thing, the re-recordings of the old songs, and I enjoyed that. And then we did Footprints in the Rock, uh, which is again, I'm proud of Footprints in the Rock, and it was kind of getting back into it. But I think Wolf at the Door, I really am proud of, and I'm hoping, a lot of guys who've reviewed it have said to me that it sounds like it comes straight out of the early 80s,
Yep.
which is a bit weird because I haven't consciously done that in any way. I mean, I just wanted my influences to show through in the music what I think heavy rock sounds like. And I guess a lot of the bands are very similar, really. I mean, what bands have got guitars, they've got bass, they've got drums, they've got a vocalist. I mean, and yet you've got these distinctive bands within that genre, so many, all playing with basically the same instruments. But I hope Trespass stand out. The songwriting and what the song is about is very important to me.
I really like the new single, Blackthorn. How did that song come about?
Well, the song has got multiple meanings. When I was a kid, we were always, because we live in the countryside, basically when the summer break came, we just went into the woods, and ran around in the fields. And anyway, I was running around one day, and I got a thorn in my head. I banged my head on a branch, and unbeknownst to me, this thorn went in under my skin. And this is a funny story in a way. I didn't know it had happened. And then months later, I said to my mum, there's something in my head, at the top of my head.
Yeah.
So she took me to the doctors, and he got a pair of tweezers, and he pulled out this blackthorn.
Wow.
I guess it was about 1.5 inches long.
Really? And it was in there for months?
Yeah.
Wow.
My brother said to me, he said, "You were never the same after that." We joked about that, but actually, Blackthorn. I mean, I wanted to write something that reflects, where I'm from, but actually, it's a little bit about me because I've had a few relationship problems in my time. Being a musician is not the easiest thing to have, when it comes to relationships. And I guess people get hooked on me, but then they find it a bit too prickly. So I guess that's what Blackthorn is about. It's about me. Don't cut yourself on me.
So what are the plans for? I know you guys played some festivals recently, but what's the touring plans for Trespass?
I would really, really love to get a UK tour with another band. I mean, we're working on things, and we got and next year. Everything got set back with the whole COVID thing, and although that allowed me a bit more time to write, it set us back, and we started to get a bit of momentum from Footprints in the Rock, and then that was sort of taken away, and we're building up again now. But I mean, I'm not in any illusions that Trespass can take over the world. I mean, I just want to share my music. I mean, that's what it's all about. And the modern times, you can share your music in a way you couldn't before through YouTube, or we're lucky to be able to make records. But it's interesting that the kind of band that Trespass is, we're kind of caught in a bit of a no man's land between not really being a big enough band to generate the record sales to finance things, and we're sort of slightly under the radar. We've got a name. I mean, it's great to walk into the room and have James Hetfield know who you are. I mean, obviously a support tour with them would be the best thing. Are you listening, James? But no, we'll just do as many shows as we can, and I'll make as many videos as I can, and I just want to share the music. I mean, the album's getting pretty good reviews. I'm pleased. Some people don't really get. They think it's a little bit out of time, but I guess when I started to write this album, I thought to myself, well, I'm literally going to do it with the tools at my disposal. I'm not going to say, right, I think we should have a Metallica type song, or not so really I ignored the last 40 years as though they hadn't happened, and just went with my gut, and with the influences, Thin Lizzy, Purple, Rainbow. Richie Blackmore's a big hero of mine when it comes to the guitar, and I think I can hear my influences on this album maybe more than I could on the last one.
And where can people find Trespass on social media? You guys on Facebook, Instagram?
Yeah, we're up. We got a Facebook page which has been getting a lot of attention now. We did the Keep It True festival, and I think, although again I've noticed that probably compared to the majority of the bands on the bill, we seem a little lightweight. Although some of our music's quite heavy, it's a little bit diverse. Whereas I notice a lot of the other bands that are maybe because they're a little younger than us and picked up different influences, they're a little bit heavy in a more modern way. We haven't got that sound that a lot of the younger band, the newer bands have got. We're more back in the day. I mean, a lot of even Sabbath, had their lighter moments, and all those bands had a diversity in their music, which I think is lacking a little bit in some of the more modern bands.
All right. I want to thank you, Mark, for your time. It was great talking to you.
Thank you, Mike. I'm sorry if I talk too much.
No, that's good. That's what we want here on the Mike Nelson Show. So it was great talking to you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay heavy, everybody.
Okay. Thank you, mate.